Dean Thomas recently went on Mike Bond's podcast where he said Khamzat Chimaev winning at UFC 319 against Dricus Du Plessis would be a disaster for the UFC. That's right, you heard that correctly. Khamzat Chimaev winning at UFC 319 would be a disaster for the UFC. And what did Dean Thomas, Mr. UFC commentator, Mr. UFC analyst, use to back up those claims? The same dumb, tired, worn out, false narratives that low IQ MMA fans have been regurgitating about Khamzat Chimaev for years. And, you know, if it was just this, maybe I wouldn't make a video on it. But this podcast that we're going to take a look at, a couple different clips here in a second, was utterly delusional. He said a couple delusional things about Khamzat, but he also was basically slandering Nassourdine Imavov as well and claiming that Imavov didn't deserve a title shot for the most trivial, dumb reason I have ever heard anyone ever say something, other than maybe Chael, like a clip of Chael, Sonnen. And I know you're probably like, Joey's always defending the Dagestanis, man. Joey loves the Muslims, man. Listen, anybody, whether it's Dean Thomas or low IQ MMA fans, who are making up and regurgitating fake narratives about fighters, I'm going to go out of my way to correct those narratives. But if you're targeting specific fighters solely because of the region of the world they're from or their religion, then of course I'm going to be extra annoyed about it because it makes absolutely zero sense. So flawed logic is what drives me nuts. And you're going to hear Dean Thomas use flawed logic about Khamzat Chimaev, but a lot of fans don't even realize the reality of the situation. So we're going to break it down again in this video for the 150th time. But also the Nassourdine Imavov stuff. So I don't want to talk anymore. Let's jump into it, guys. We're going to start off with Dean the Dagestani hater. I watched the majority of this hour-long podcast, 51-minute podcast. And 5 minutes in, I heard this and I should have known. People were telling me, oh, Dean's a Dagestani hater, man. He said if Islam beats JDM, he's not pound for pound number one. He said trade Magomed Ankalaev to the PFL. Dumbest take I've ever heard in my entire life. If I compiled a video of Dean Thomas being a Dagestani hater, we'd be here for 2 hours, okay? So we're just going to focus on this podcast. One thing I want to say before we get started. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. But also, Mike Bond, who is a MMA media member, he does decent interviews. Go check out his channel. Go check out this full podcast. I will link it down in the description. Man, he needs to get better guests than Dean Thomas. I'll tell you that. He needs to start inviting me on. I'll go on and set the record straight about Khamzat Chimaev DDP. Anyway, let's start off with this, man. And I want you to remember this. I want you to remember this clip when he talks about Nassourdine Imavov later in the next 2 clips that I'm going to show you. Listen to this.
Coming off that knockout, that was good. And then I got to say, Bryce Mitchell was brilliant. I mean, honestly, Mike, going into this fight, I didn't think he was going to win. I was like, man, I didn't think he was going to make weight, much less win. I didn't think the fight was going to happen.
Bryce Mitchell was brilliant. Bryce Mitchell was brilliant. That performance against Said Nurmagomedov was absolutely brilliant. It was amazing. It was so technical. It was beautiful. It was exciting. Okay, I know I'm putting words in his mouth. You heard it for yourself. Bryce Mitchell put on a brilliant performance. I want you guys to remember that. I want you guys to remember that when he starts talking about Nassourdine Imavov. 2 clips from now, I want you to remember this clip right here. And by the way, isn't it awfully funny how the same people who criticize Dagestani fighters for being lay-and-pray wrestlers, which is almost never true, by the way, very rarely true, are the same people sucking off Bryce Mitchell for the shittiest performance in the history of the UFC. Very ironic, but I'm getting tired. I've already broke it down in my post-fight, but I'm getting tired of these white American Christian wrestlers ruining the sport with their lay and praying, okay? But Dean Thomas thought it was brilliant. Next clip I'm going to show you, okay, is about Nassourdine Imavov. This is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my entire life, so I had to play it on here for you guys to hear it because I've never heard something so dumb in the entirety of my life. But Dean Thomas, you know, everyone thinks that Nassourdine Imavov is French, but Dean Thomas knows that he was born in Dagestan, so he's Dagestani. So in Dean Thomas's mind, he doesn't want to see him get a title shot. So he has a reason why Nassourdine Imavov shouldn't get a title shot, even if he beats Caio Borralho and is on a long win streak against the top fighters in the division and undeniably is the #1 contender and should fight for the title next if he beats Caio Borralho. Dean Thomas has a reason why Nassourdine Imavov shouldn't get a title shot. Listen to this. This is golden.
I mean, so with Imavov, the fact that he had to remind everybody how to pronounce his name is a bad sign. That's always a bad. You can't fight for a title when no one knows how to pronounce your name. Like it's.
Is that not the dumbest fucking thing you ever heard in your entire? You can't fight for a title, man. Nobody knows your name, man. Nobody knows your name, man. You can't fight for a title. You just said his name perfectly, you bum. But let's continue.
You can't do it. Like in fact, you need a nickname. Like even with like Reiner the Ritter, like we can't really say his name right, so we just call him RDR. You know what I'm saying? We give when you get a nickname or a shortcut to your name, that's when you know you're ready for a title. And Imavov ain't got that. Like that's the unfortunate situation. And in fact, like every time I say his name, I have to think in my head to make sure I get it right because I don't want to be disrespectful. So while I'm saying he deserves it, it's just like, man, it's hard for the powers that be to put you in a spot that you're going to sell pay-per-views or get eyeballs on attention when you're not that dude, when you're not a big seller like that.
So Nassourdine Imavov has a hard name and he's not a big pay-per-view seller and doesn't draw a lot of eyes, so he shouldn't get a title shot, which I find awfully hypocritical and hilarious considering later in this very podcast he says Khamzat Chimaev would be a disaster for the UFC, but yet you tell me who's a bigger draw, Khamzat or DDP? You guys tell me who's a bigger pay-per-view seller, Khamzat or DDP? And that we should never be using that to justify a title shot, but he's saying that Khamzat winning would be a disaster, yet Khamzat is a far bigger draw than DDP. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Because the next clip I'm going to show you is honestly worse, because sometimes I watch some of these MMA pundits, I see clips on Twitter and whatnot, and I think, are they even living in the same reality? You know, sometimes I hear fan statements like this and I see them in like the YouTube live chat and I'm like, I'm reading chat and I'm like, are these guys even living in reality? Or are they that biased against certain fighters? We can't even recognize what reality is. Because right here, he starts talking about who should get the next middleweight title fight. And he starts acting like Nassourdine Imavov is a boring fighter. Listen to this.
Do they go back to the Dricus rematch? Or
no, you don't go back. You don't go back to the Dricus rematch. You insert somebody else. You insert and this is a real highly. This could happen. This really could happen in Paris. That fight be a snooze fest.
Sure.
And then you just put RDR in there.
That fight could be a snooze fest. Well, any fight could be a snooze fest. It's possible. I don't think Caio Borralho, not RDR. I don't think Caio Borralho versus Nassourdine Imavov is going to be a snooze fest. But what's crazy is, and I'm going to stop it right there for a second. If Nassourdine versus Caio Borralho would be a snooze fest, which fighter would you guys probably blame it on? I'm just saying in a hypothetical scenario, if I asked you right now, who is the more boring fighter, Borralho or Imavov? I'm sure the majority of you guys would say objectively Borralho. Now, I don't think Borralho's boring, but I'm just saying if you had to say, okay, who's more exciting, Imavov or Borralho? Imavov coming off finishes of Cannonier and Adesanya, you would say, oh, it's probably Borralho, the decision machine who grapples most of the time. But no, then Dean Thomas then goes on to elaborate and act like Nassourdine Imavov is boring. Listen to this shit. I can't make this shit up.
Right. And that's highly probable that the Imavov Borralho fight is going to suck.
I don't disagree. I think it's very on the table. It would be more out of character for Caio than it would be for Imavov at this point. But
Imavov.
I don't know if I just misheard that. It would be more out of character for Borralho. So he's saying Borralho's more exciting. Again, I don't think Borralho's not exciting. I don't think he's boring. But I'm just saying objectively, most fans would say Imavov's more exciting. So I don't know what's going on between these two right now. If there's some confusion. Dean, I don't know, low IQ, considering his, Khamzat and Bryce Mitchell takes. But let's let him finish.
It's difficult to fight. He's stubborn. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? He's a stubborn guy. Like he's not going to give you anything. He's not going to give you much. And when you're faster than everybody, you can do that. Like you can sit back and wait and be like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Come get it. And that's how he fights. So it could be very boring. As long as he gets his win, he's going to be like, give me a title shot. And then we're going to be like, dude, I don't know, man. I don't know.
When has Imavov been boring? When's the last time he had a boring fight? When he took a short notice fight against Sean Strickland, who's literally the most boring fighter on the whole roster. Like, the Cannonier fight was fun. The Adesanya fight was fun. I'm trying to think of the fights before that. You know, even the not Kelvin Gastelum, the Chris Curtis fight was fun. The Buckley fight was fun. Every fight that I can think of Imavov off the top of my head. There's only one that I can think of wasn't particularly entertaining. That was the Strickland fight. And that wasn't that bad. And again, who do we blame that on? The guy who's in every boring fight ever in his entire career, Sean Strickland? Or we blame it on Imavov? He acts like Imavov hangs back and refuses to fight. Like he's some boring-ass counter strike. I don't get it at all. And he's saying RDR should get the title shot ahead of him. How does that make any sense? Makes absolutely no sense. But again, Dean Thomas probably just looks up his Wikipedia page because he doesn't have any critical thinking skills. And he's like, Nassourdine Imavov, born in Dagestan? I think he's born in Dagestan or he's raised in Dagestan, something along those lines. He's like, oh no, he's boring. He must be boring. Super low IQ. Let's get off talking about Nassourdine Imavov. Let's go back to Alex, as Khalil Roundtree would say. Let's move on to Khamzat Chimaev. Because there were some incredibly bad takes, but I'm going to skip ahead to him talking about Khamzat Chimaev's skill set. This isn't the worst thing. We're going to get to him pushing false narratives in a second. But listen to this, man. He acts like Khamzat Chimaev isn't a well-rounded fighter at all. It's crazy.
They start trying to get up. Come on, get up. Get to the fence. Get up. And all he does is take your back, dump you down, take your back, dump you down. And in order to be successful against him, I believe you have to show him that you can grapple with him. And show him that maybe you're a better grappler than him. And if you're a better grappler than him, you limit his options and you start to break his confidence because, like, I believe that's his crutch. Like, the fact that he can take anybody down, that's a crutch.
That's a crutch. His grappling is a crutch. Maybe I'm the dumb one. But sometimes, you know, whenever I pay attention to people talking about fights and trying to break down fight styles, I swear everyone tries to, like, come off as they're way smarter than they are. Because what I just heard there from Dean Thomas, who's a coach, I think he used to fight back in the day, just sound like a whole lot of like fairy tale, like made up scenarios. Like, yeah, man, you have to go out there and show him you're the better grappler and break his confidence. Like, how dumb was that entire thing? And then he ends it with, yeah, Khamzat's grappling is his crutch. Like, Khamzat didn't go out there and outstrike a prime Gilbert Burns, drop him multiple times. Like, Khamzat didn't go out there and one-shot KO Gerald Meerschaert. You can say what you want about Gerald Meerschaert, but to put him out in the first 30 seconds with a crystal, you know, a picture-perfect right hand was impressive. But instead, Dean Thomas, the UFC analyst, I mean, think about this. Does this even, I'm being dead serious. You guys got to let me know. I truly need to know. Does this even make any sense in this fairy tale world? Like, because he was acting like, yeah, man, Dricus needs to go out there and try to grapple immediately. That is the dumbest take I have ever heard in my entire life. I don't think you need to fight like you're scared for your life of getting taken down. But anybody saying, yeah, man, Dricus needs to go out there and shoot a takedown to show him who's boss. This is weird, nothing burger, fairy tale land, trying to pretend you're a smart MMA analyst. That's what I believe it is. I'll play it one more time.
Yeah, I don't need to play this game. And it was a striking match. All these other guys, they start trying to get up. Come on, get up, get to the fence, get up. And all he does is take your back, dump you down, take your back, dump you down. And in order to be successful against him, I believe you have to show him that you can grapple with him.
So you have to show him that you can grapple with him by trying to take him down, which he said before this, which it cut off a little bit, but you get my point. Why not just show him you can grapple by stuffing his takedowns? But anyway, again, this is just nothing. This is meaningless.
Show him that maybe you're a better grappler than him. And if you're a better grappler than him, you limit his options and you start to break his confidence because, like, I believe that's his crutch. Like, the fact that he can take anybody down, that's a crutch.
That's a crutch. I mean, he can take you down and submit you, but he can also strike with you as well. He's shown that time and time again. But okay, maybe we're splitting hairs there, but I just can't believe what a non-state, like, I swear all these dudes are trying to, like, man, you got to go out there and you got to shoot a high crotch on a Khamzat and maybe if you dump him to the ground and maybe you get a little bit control, you could show him you're a better like, what? Like, stop trying to act like you're so smart when you're literally saying nothing. Like, maybe you show you're a better grappler. Well, what if you're not? What if you shoot a double leg and then you get Darce choked immediately and look like a fucking idiot? So horrible fight analysis. But where it really gets bad Where it gets particularly bad is him claiming that if Khamzat Chimaev wins against DDP, it's a disaster for the UFC. Remember earlier, he's saying the biggest stars need to be the guys who are fighting for titles because it's what the UFC, it's what's best for business. Now this is what he's saying.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. If Khamzat wins, it's a disaster actually, because you can't tell me that a part of you is just like thinking this fight actually might not happen.
Of course. I see everyone saying
it's not because of Dricus.
And it's not because of Dricus, the guy who turned down International Fight Week because he was injured. The guy who turned down UFC 300 because he was injured. The guy who turned down his initial title shot in Australia because he was injured. I know he didn't pull out of those fights. I'm not claiming that he did. But he's acting as if, yeah, man, there's no way this fight gets canceled unless it's Khamzat Chimaev because Khamzat's a pullout merchant. Because, again, that's the low IQ, low-hanging fruit that everyone regurgitates without actually having any facts to back it up, because I'm going to debunk it here in a second. He's like, yeah, man, you can't tell me you think this fight's going to happen, man. Khamzat Chimaev's pulled out of so many fights, right? And we're going to expose Dean Thomas as a hypocrite here in a second with one of his own fighters that he wants to get a title shot very, very shortly. But let's skip ahead. We'll skip Mike Bond's response. Again, you can check out the full video. I'll link it down in the description. But this is basically the same exchange. We're just going to skip ahead a little bit so I don't waste your time. Listen to this.
Dead.
Well, no, I'm not going to be pessimistic about it and say he's going to show up. But my point is that if he does show up and he does win, do we trust him to be able to fight again? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing. Is like, can he do it twice, 2 or 3 times? Because we need movement. Like, I hate when it's just like static, when there's no movement in these divisions. And in order for there to be movement in the divisions, the champions have to fight.
Correct.
So I agree on that. We need movement in the division. And if you want to say, okay, we need more activity from champions, fair enough. But to sit here and I'm so tired of the narrative, oh, Khamzat's always injured. Khamzat's so inactive. Khamzat has been inactive the last 2 years. But you should put context on that. Just like people, I'm sure in a couple months, people might be like, Ankalaev's inactive, man. Pereira turned him down multiple times. Just like when people were like, Francis Ngannou was inactive. The UFC was icing him. But the narrative that I cannot stand is that Khamzat's some type of pullout merchant. Let's pull up Khamzat's career. Okay? Robert Whittaker, June 2024. Khamzat pulled out with an illness. Khamzat pulled out with an illness. Okay. So there you go, in 2024. The Paulo Costa fight, which for some reason people blame on Khamzat Chimaev, Costa pulled out with an infection. He had staph infection, okay? So in the last couple of years, you have the Robert Whittaker fight, okay? You can say the Nate Diaz fight as well because, okay, you didn't make weight. The whole card got shuffled around, whatever. So you have 2 pullouts, okay? 2 legitimate pullouts, I guess, even though the weight miss was much higher because they told him to stop cutting weight because they wanted to make him fight Kevin Holland at a catch weight because they knew Nate Diaz, they set him up as a sacrificial lamb. So even if Chimaev missed by half a pound, Nate Diaz was never going to accept that fight and then the card was going to be screwed. But let's go down, and people always mention these fights right here, these Leon Edwards fights, okay? You guys see this December fight here? Okay, that was canceled. Edwards tested positive for COVID. By the way, everyone was getting sick at this point in time. Fights were getting canceled left and right. In December, both Khamzat and Leon had COVID. It only says Edwards here. They both had it at this point in time. They said, let's kick the can down the road a couple weeks. January 20th, Chimaev's still recovering because he's still sick. So they're like, let's kick the can down the road a couple more weeks. He's still sick. So I don't understand how anyone counts these as pullouts at all. Because they were both sick, the fight got canceled, and then the UFC just rescheduled it for 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, and he had a long-term illness in a time where the entire world was shook up. So none of these 3 count, in my opinion. I don't care what anybody says. None of those count. So if none of these count, because, again, the UFC is just kicking the can down the road, and it's not like he's habitually getting injured and pulling out of each fight for a unique reason. And the initial fight, they were both sick. So let's actually count the real ones, which the real one is basically Robert Whittaker. Okay, and you want to include the Nate Diaz one because of the weight? Sure, include it. So there's 2 of them. How many pullouts does Dricus Du Plessis have in his UFC career? Let's check that out. Kelvin Gastelum, I think Kelvin Gastelum was injured. Fluffy Hernandez, this fight just got rebooked to Kelvin Gastelum for some reason. Chris Curtis was injured. What about Andre Muniz? Who was injured here? Oh, Du Plessis withdrew. Du Plessis withdrew. Okay, let's take a look. Another canceled fight. We have Trevin Giles. Du Plessis withdrew. I think one of these was an injury. The other was a visa issue. But either way, withdrew. Let's look down here. March of 2019. We have KSW. Du Plessis not medically cleared. And you could say, oh, Joey, that's not his fault. And granted, okay, maybe it's not his fault. But again, another pullout. So we have, oh, wait, how many do we have? We have 2 UFC pullouts. We have 2 UFC pullouts. And you can say, oh, Joey, that was a while ago. That was 2021. Khamzat has 1 legitimate pullout. 1 legitimate pullout in the last couple years. And people are acting like, oh, no, man. Oh, no. He never makes it to fight. And you can say, Khamzat Chimaev is inactive. And I'll grant you that point. He has been a bit of an inactive, okay? But he beat Whitaker in October. He was ready to go in February, but the UFC decided to give beta male soy boy Sean Strickland a title shot. So Khamzat had to wait out for his title shot. Before that, he had visa issues that have since been resolved. And the UFC wasn't booking him because they were waiting basically to potentially give him a title shot because they had promised him a title shot over and over and over again. So even if you want to include the Nate Diaz fight, he has 2 pullouts in 5 years. Because, again, those Leon Edwards pullouts do not count. I don't care what anyone says. I've been saying this for years. It does not matter. If somebody gets injured, like, oh, UFC, oh, Raul Rosas Jr. pulled out of a fight. They rebooked him for a week later. He never fought. Is that considered a pullout? No. It's not. And if you want to talk about his activity, let's talk about activity since 2020. Dricus Du Plessis, 9 fights since 2020. 9 fights since 2020. There you go. Read them and weep. Read them and weep. I know I'm scrolling up. Look. 9 fights. How many does Khamzat have since 2020? Let me take a look. Let's take a look. Since 2020, in the UFC, if you don't include outside the UFC, just in the UFC here, we have 8 fights. 8 fights from Khamzat Chimaev since 2020. But instead, everyone just regurgitates low-hanging fruit and acts like Khamzat Chimaev is a pull-out merchant because he pulled out one time against Robert Whitaker when he was deathly ill. And also, he's a nightmare. If he wins the title, well, he would be a way bigger star than DDP. That's objectively true. So, Dean Thomas, you were saying, oh, Nassourdine Imavov shouldn't be champion because he doesn't have any name power. What a dumb take, man. I'm so tired of hearing these dumb, bad faith arguments about Khamzat Chimaev because they want to just push fake narratives because they don't actually have any critical thinking skills. They're like, yeah, man. I mean, even if you want to include the Leon Edwards fights, okay? So you want to say he had 5 pullouts, man. Well, 3 of them were in 2020, half a decade ago, which only 2 of those were technically his fault, which they weren't even really his fault. But also what I find hilarious is, you know who Dean Thomas coaches, okay? I'm not saying he's their head coach. He's the coach of Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer pulled out because he had a bellyache against Kelvin Gastelum. But you know what's even more hypocritical? You know whose corner he was in earlier this year? He was in Sean Brady's corner. A guy who has been open. He wants Sean Brady to get a title shot this year. Okay? How many pullouts does Sean Brady have? This is Dean Thomas's boy. I haven't heard him or any fan say, man, Sean Brady never shows up, man. Sean Brady's a pullout merchant, man. How many pullouts do you think Sean Brady has? Okay? Let's take a look. Oh, against Vicente Luque, Brady unable to compete, 2024. Jack Della Maddalena, Brady infection. Michelle Pedetta, Brady groin injury. That's all. That's only to 2023. Let's go back even more. Oh, Kevin Lee, Brady injury. Let's keep going back. Bilal Muhammad, Brady withdrew. We have five Sean Brady pullouts since 2020. Where's the outrage from Dean Thomas? Where's the outrage from the fan base? People are like, yeah, man, I want to see him in #1 contender fight, bro. They're not saying, oh, Sean Brady's a disaster. Maybe they'll turn on him soon enough. But Dean Thomas is working his corner. I haven't heard him come out and say, yeah, man, I don't trust Sean Brady, man. If Sean Brady gets a title shot, it's a disaster for the UFC. These are just dumb, low IQ, low-hanging fruit, false narratives regurgitated because people don't like Khamzat Chimaev. And what I find funny is Khamzat Chimaev is super exciting. Khamzat Chimaev is an elite-level fighter. Khamzat Chimaev has beaten the best. Khamzat Chimaev, you can't call him a boring lay and pray guy, even though people do. You almost wonder what it could be. You almost wonder what it could be. It could be a many of reasons, but you almost wonder. I just start to think, wonder what it could be to make people say, yeah, man, I don't want Khamzat as champion, man. But it's just stupid. I'm tired of these fake narratives that Khamzat has habitually been pulling out, yet the only reason he's been active is because the UFC's asked him to sit on the sidelines and wait his turn, which has been horrible mismanagement by the UFC. And then on top of that, he had visa issues that have since been resolved. The one pullout he's had in the last few years is against Robert Whittaker, and he returned a couple months later. Would I love to see him more active? Do I hope that he's more active if he wins the belt? Sure. But Dean Thomas is a complete idiot in this entire podcast. Again, I encourage you guys to go check it out. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm so tired of hearing this. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.